Okay.
Perfect.
Yay, happy Valentine's Day.
Hi, how you doing, sweetie?
I'm good. I think this is really interesting. So, relationships are something that takes work. Everybody says that. I grew up Catholic. The Catholic Church requires people to do some kind of, I certainly didn't do this because I don't know what it's called, but whatever it is, it's some kind of like counseling thing before you get married or whatever. And I think
It's probably a really good idea.
I know, I think they like put that into place based on all the divorces that were happening in the world or whatever it is. I don't know. If someone told me to go do that, I would have said no at the time anyway. It's like something I would rebel against
That's because you
100%.
were like me. We were child brides.
Anyway, yeah,
You were
so
older than me, actually, I think.
yeah. So I think it's really interesting that now we know a lot about relationships and what makes them work. And a lot of this is based on actual research. So I think it's like super cool to recognize that there has been a study since 1938. Leave it to Harvard, right? It's the Harvard study of adult development. And they went into sort of bad neighborhoods in Boston, low socioeconomic, and they grabbed a bunch of boys at the time and they started following them in their lives and they meet with them and do like questionnaires and kind of interviews with them. They do self-assessments, all through their lives. Okay. And then they got the wives in on it. I don't know that anyone had a same-sex couple or anything like that. I'm not sure about that. I also know that there's not a lot of diversity in this study as far as these were like white people in Boston that were studied, because that's just who they started studying at the time. So those are some of the limitations of the study, but here's what we learned from it. And they talk about like what have we learned about happiness through these people's lives? That's really interesting to follow people since 1938, and then their
Yeah.
children are in it, and that's cool, right? That's really
Incredible.
cool. So yeah, so I heard the
And
man
who
who's
runs this? Is this the Department of Sociology that runs these studies? Anyway, I'm on a tangent, but I'm just curious, like who are the scientists? What department are they in? Psychology, sociology?
interesting. I mean, it's like adult development. So the researcher, I've heard him speak. He's incredible.
I bet.
And I'm not sure like what exact degree
Let's
he
meet
has,
him.
but
Let's bring him on.
um but I would like to bring him on. He's a really
2024
interesting guy, and
goals.
he has some interesting things like social exercise. He talks about like how you have to actually kind of flex and train your social interactions. That's like sort of interesting to me.
Well, didn't we
Anyway,
learn that
he's
in
great.
COVID, right? Okay, so sorry for all the tangents. I'll
We
stop
did.
talking.
Okay, so this research study actually they established this really strong correlation between deep relationships and well-being. So really important to have really deep, good relationships. And you and I asked people, we figured this out in clinic, right? We're doctors, we figured out in clinic to start asking people about their close relationships. And I learned the question from Dr. Leonora, I can't even say her first name, Tiranoa Dr. Lodog in Arizona. She said it's a conference that we were at. I asked my patients, do you have 4 people I could call in the middle of the night, I could call right now that would come running, do you have those 4 people? And I will tell you that, I thought that was an interesting idea. It's not like, how is your relationship? That's kind of a flat question. So everybody out there, think about this. You have 4 people you could call and they would come running. So for you and I, like we would definitely be on the list for each other. We would come running. You sometimes call me at 1 a.m. I get the phone. That happens sometimes. Sometimes I call you because I can't do the time difference when you're like in Japan and it's like 1 a.m. and I'll talk to you then. You know,
Many times you call me at 5:30 in the morning here in
I
California
I
with
do
a full steam ahead.
definitely.
And I was like, I haven't even spoken a word. Wait.
Uh, yeah, that does happen. So anyway, what is sad to me in reality of life these days is that many people I ask this question, it almost I could cry when I say it. They kind of pause and look at me. And that is so sad because I think unfortunately the way the world is set up, we're just not in these deep, great relationships and people find themselves very lonely. So that is a sad happen because if if you ask people that question, it should be like, oh yeah, of course. And your 4 people right off the bat, right? Like here, you can call them on my cell phone right now. We've got them. So that's important. I think, and I love that the study sort of found that wellness and living well and being happy in older age and being happy all through your life has a lot to do with relationships. So one thing is asking people like, do you have someone you cherish? And, you know, do you, that's like a nice word, I think. That didn't come out of the study. That's just, I like that word. So if you're listening to this and you're like, huh, yeah, I kind of do have someone I cherish. Okay, so here's how to make it better. Right. So then I'm like, well, what are the keys to these good relationships? What do you think a key to a good relationship is? Let's flip through it. We're gonna have three, but what do you think?
I'm a
Just on the spot.
communicator, so I
You're a
like
communicator.
communication. So I like
Mhm.
connection and communication. And I know that like it's I think a very feminine need, you know, and I think in masculine feminine relationships, it's sometimes a struggle because men need probably less daily, even though you are married to a total communicator. So I shouldn't really say gender wise, like Alan, Kara's husband, and I are probably much more like each other, where we
Yeah,
just
you
want to
have
talk about.
a
I went to the grocery store. So Kara will be at my house and her husband will call and be like, okay, so like I went to the store and I couldn't find, and then I did this. And Kara's like waiting for the punchline. Like, do you need something? Can I help you? Like, is there something can I solve something for you? And he just wants to talk. She's been out of town and he just wants to
Well,
connect.
I mean, what he doesn't know is that I've like paused a meeting and I'm like, "Ooh, this is important. He's calling me." And then I'm like talking about like, I don't know, like how many times the dogs went to the, use the facilities on the dog walk or whatever. It's like
But
whatever.
I bring up Alan because I shouldn't be so gender
Yeah.
specific. So there are some of us where it's communication and connection, but we need some amount of that, right?
Mhm.
Like, so if you're trying to connect with your aging parents, like call them today, or just send notes. Like we had this exercise in one of our glow ups where it was about sending love notes to people and just
Yeah.
just speaking your truth, speaking your words, letting them know that you're available in their life. So that would be today's Valentine's Day. That would be a beautiful thing you could do. Create connection.
Mhm.
Connection and connectivity is one of those things that creates a through line in relationships and lets people know you're showing up for them.
Yeah, and I think these days, we have all these other opportunities to connect with people that we didn't have growing up. So we didn't have all this social media stuff. And one of the interviews I was listening to about this sort of happiness research study, they were talking about this, and I thought it was a really good point in that, there's a big difference between a thumbs up or a like or a heart or something on someone's post, right? And like taking the effort of writing them an email or a direct communication. And and so it's interesting, like, can we fill this void of like, can we nurture our relationships via these online things and via our phones and Snapchat and whatever else we're using all the time? And sort of the answers that were presented is like, yes, I think that is possible. And it might not be look the same on each different platform all the time, right? But there are people, and people too, who like meet their spouses and or their lifelong partners or their best friend, on one of these sort of platforms in some way. So that's an interesting thing for our children to think about because like they do a lot of it's we used to talk on the phone. They do voice notes. It's really interesting.
I
Voice
love
notes.
voice notes.
Yeah, I
I
like
love
voice
them.
they're efficient, right? We
Wait,
like that. They're efficient.
so what did the study say that the happiest relationships come down
Mm.
to
A
a
few
few.
characteristics. Yeah, and I think it's more that people were more happy if they had these, like, solid relationships, which is
Okay.
interesting, and so some of it was that's why he was talking about, like, sort of this sort of, like, do you have, like, a social exercise
Yeah.
kinda thing? Like, do you actually go like, try to connect with people? That would make you
Okay.
happier as
That
you
the
age, which is
people
interesting,
who
but
live
hold
the
on. I think
longest
one of the points, though, was and be happiest because it's a happiness
the
study.
happiness.
Your
The live the
relationship
longest
really
and be the
need
happiness. Yeah.
they need to be nurtured, your relationships. It's not like, "Oh, I'm in a committed relationship. I've been living with this person 30 years and I'm living my best life. It's not that. It's like there's specific things in the relationship. So this came from something else. This isn't from this research study, but one thing when you were talking about communication that I think is really important, and we do this, you and I together, I'll use us as an example. We have bad days, we work together, where we can be snappy, we can be annoyed about various things. We're like real people in real relationship, right? And there's this thing that people in successful relationships do that we do. I will tell you, I could go back in our text thread and find it, where we do conflict and like relationship repair. So we'll be like, oh, sorry, I was super snappy. Like, I didn't mean that. I'm just like worried about this other thing. And we'll like write a text like, so sorry, that was all me or whatever. Like we will do that. Like if there's any conflict that comes up. But I think that's something that's not necessarily the case for other people. They did talk about this in the research study, in that what if you have like conflict or something comes up and you never communicate with the person? That's not good.
It's
That's
not
not
good.
good for the relationship or your health, right? So that's interesting.
It's the tendency for the people who are a bit more avoidant and they go back into the same pattern and just pretend like everything's okay because it's easier and there's not a true repair, that can cause some damage. Yeah. And this, I think, is a really important thing for everybody, for work relationships, for parenting, for friendships, for that if you lash out, often we are the hardest on the people closest to us because they see our insides more. And when people see our insides, they get exposed to sometimes some of the harder stuff than like you see way more my insides than my patients, right?
I should hope so.
I don't have huge boundaries, but that is a boundary I still have.
That is a very clear boundary, yes.
And owning your part is a really big part in relationships. That was like what you said. That's the repair. Part of the repair is like, this is a shortcoming of mine. I know Kara the other day called me in a meeting, called me on the phone and was like, said, you're really like, your tone is like aggressive.
No, we were on a Zoom meeting. So
and you need to be a little more inspiring, like I don't know what's going on with you, but like pull your shit together. And it was like such good feedback. Right. And it's like, okay. And so instead of being mad at her or whatever, I'm like, okay, I'm getting immediate feedback. And that's really great. Like if we can be in these kind of relationships where we can take feedback and help grow, and like Kara is trying to level up this year. We keep coming back to like these themes that we're for each other really holding space for. Yeah. And I'm watching her, I'm witnessing her. She's crushing it in her business. Everything she's doing is boom, boom, boom. She's really in it. And I can feel it in her friendships and relationships. I'm trying to expand and widen and broaden. It's a little like more energetic, And so that's what she was holding me to. And, anyway, it was I love this.
What happened? I liked what happened. We haven't talked about this since this happened. Actually, we haven't even debriefed on it. So I was like, Hill, give me a call. We put it mute on Zoom. We went out, we had this conversation. And then what'd you do? You took a break and then you came back in a totally different space. I don't know what you did.
I just took a breath, right? You're like, when you're getting direct feedback from someone who loves you and can hold space for you, and she's saying to you, this is what you need. My instinct, I'm like a total bulldog instinct, is to be like, oh my God, that bitch. But for 1 second, and then I breathe into it and I go,
tried it on.
She's so right. Like, oh my God. Okay. So I need to just look in the mirror. A lot of times what I do is I'll look in the mirror and just be like, snap out of it. You got this. Life's good. Like, stop it. Stop micromanaging or being in the details. But there have been times where like the repair part where Kara and I need to take space. I like it
Yeah.
in our where we get into a fight or we're tense and she's tense about probably something else and I'm tense about something else. This is what happens a lot in relationships. There's other things happening. You have a hard
Yep.
time coming into real time with it and you're
Right.
stepping into something else like parenting. This happens all the time. Like if you had a
Yeah.
tough day at work or your spouse had a tough day at work and then all of a sudden you're parenting and someone's coming in hot and the other
Yeah.
person's like,
But
dude, right? And it's so easy to just be like, you don't understand me or blah, 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 blah. So Kara and I tend to like acknowledge that there's a breakdown, take space.
yes.
Usually I go on a walk
Yep.
and she does what she does. And then we come back together and we repair. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I was really like yucky.
Yeah, and I'll do it too, like, "Oh, I didn't mean that to come out that way," or whatever it is, and then we just move on to the next thing because we have that trust in an established relationship. I think that's what these relationships are about. They're looking at, people in married relationships in this study, I think, but, like, we're friends and it's the same thing, right? It's all communication and, like, figuring out how to move through, like, the harder times and recognizing where you tend to go. Like, I'll get angry and just, like, just like, that's it. Like, I'll just say it straight, right? I'm just kind of a straight shooter, which is not ideal at all times. It's not a great skill all the time, but it's good sometimes. But so I know that I do that because I'm old and I've been through this, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing is like where are my go-tos? And I'm sure somewhere I know this. I learned this in my family unit or so, there's some background to whatever you're doing in relationship that keeps coming up over and over again. And oftentimes it's just like looking inside of me like, okay, this is me. This is the way I'm gonna react. Like I'm gonna try to play the blame game or I'm gonna try to just get infuriated or whatever it is, I had like the Irish genes come out or something happens over here. So I know that, and that's helpful because you know what your tendencies are. Other people will crumple up and not communicate at all. Like cold shoulder or something like that. So one of the things that was interesting about relationships actually as I'm saying that is that you could predict the like couple relationships back to them by if they focused their bodies in body language toward each other. That's really interesting, right? Like, you could predict that. If you could predict, like, these are the couples that are gonna, like, make it further if they just turn to each other, and so that was one of the other things is, like, okay, so this is a scary stat, Hillary, I'm gonna tell you. 11 hours a day, Americans on average spend in solitary activities, which I'm just gonna call solo. We're just solo 11 hours a day.
Oh my
Me,
God, breaks my
solo.
heart.
Yeah, and if you're on a dog walk, you're with your dog, but that's you're alone, right? So it's like these solo times. The commutes to work, people are typically alone. It's like all these sometimes breaks, like, we take a rest break from work or whatever, we're alone. Like, it's interesting how people 11 hours is a lot in a day, actually, where you're
There's
alone.
not that many hours in the day. You're sleeping
I
for
know.
eight
You
of
and
them.
I, our work is like with other people, we're with people all day, but other people don't have that. So, I mean, I would argue that that's actually helpful to our health to have those connections with, everyone, our patients, our staff people, everybody. But anyway, um, I think that's a big piece of it is like, where do we find these? We're so distracted all the times. It's our cell phones part of it, but we're so distracted. And where do we find time to be intentional in the relationship? And they did talk about that. Like, you have to be intentional about the relationship. It's not like, oh, I found this person, they check all the boxes that I was looking for, and now I'm set. Like, it has to be like, okay, we're growing, we're different people now, whatever it is. Like 20 years later, you're a different person if you're with that person. Or you and I, like us in our 20s, we were up to very different things, very different things. So what are we going to do? You have to like ask the person and communicate.
And have shared experiences. I
So
feel like
yeah,
having shared experiences and making memories and connection and doing things together and growing and challenging. And I think that can be a big thing that's hard. I know for me, anyway, you just creating shared experiences and shared laughter and memories. And I really feel like those things are very important. So it gets back to the connection, like relationships it's an active process. And the moment it becomes kind of like, okay, this is more passive, or I can just count on this, then you're not growing and nourishing and nurturing it. And what Kara's, I think wrapping it back up to the original study is like, you're going to be doing this with some key people. You can't do it with everybody in your life, but it is easy, like watching, it is easy to have random acts of just communication and kindness that can take something or a connection to deepen and to help it thrive and flourish. So I want to do that today. I'm going to spend time on my phone is how I'm going to do it today. And just send love notes to many, many people in my life that I want to touch, that I haven't touched for a while. And if you're listening and you're in my life, and I just want you to know that I love you and I'm grateful for your connection. I think it's everything. I always had a dream. It's the weirdest thing. I'm an extrovert. And most people know that if they've watched this, which means that I get energy from being with people, learning from people, in crowds, new people, new experiences, outward living. I really, truly do. 11 hours alone to me would be like really challenging. So that's like interesting feedback. I want to look at that in my life. Like, how many hours am I spending alone? And could I increase my daily happiness if I have more togetherness with people in my life? Like, and not everybody needs it as much as everybody else, right? But like, I know I really need it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's good. That's a good thing to look at when you're structuring and kind of being the architect of your design of your days, right? So I think that's a really nice way to end up, actually. So the most consistent finding of this, help me with the math, it's 80 something year study from 1938, is that positive relationships keep us happier, healthier, and maybe we live longer. So happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Much love.